At dawn, they reached the canyon where the lighthouse, their chance to summon the fleet, stood among the rocks. But they were being chased by blue-haired hounds, their barking tearing at their ears. Sierra led the way, her legs burning. "Keep up, John!" she shouted. He threw a stone, knocking down one animal, but the second leaped, knocking him over. Kira rushed back, grabbing the greyhound by the neck. The beast snarled, its claws tearing at her skin, but she pushed it into the abyss. John grabbed her as the ground cracked beneath their feet, and they rolled down toward the river. Gunshots rang out. The enemies were shooting from above. In the water, a blue-haired fish rushed at them, its teeth snapping at their feet. John hit it with a piece of debris, blood staining the water, and Sierra dragged him to the shore. They fell, gasping for air. "The lighthouse is over there," Sierra breathed out. John squeezed her hand. "We'll make it, girl." The canyon walls rose high above them, casting long shadows in the early morning light. The lighthouse stood atop the highest cliff, a tall metal structure crowned with a powerful transmitter beacon. It had been built by explorers from another world, long since abandoned, but still functional. "How do we get up there?" John asked, eyeing the steep ascent. "Climb," Kira said simply, pointing to a narrow path cut into the rock face. "And hope they don't shoot us down." The climb was treacherous. Loose rocks gave way beneath their feet, sending small avalanches down the cliff. Every movement was agony for their exhausted bodies. John's wounds had reopened, leaving a trail of red blood on the gray stone. Shara's blue hands were raw and bleeding from gripping the sharp rocks. Halfway up, a shot ricocheted off the cliff near Shara's head. She pressed herself against the rock wall, eyes scanning the canyon rim. A collector sniper had positioned himself on a ledge opposite their position. "Keep climbing," John ordered. "I'll create a diversion." Before Sierra could protest, he pulled out his small scrambler device, adjusted something, and threw it across the canyon. It exploded in a flash of light and noise, momentarily blinding the sniper. John seized the moment to continue climbing, pulling Sierra with him. "Federation tech," he explained with a grim smile, "full of surprises." They reached the canyon rim, exhausted but alive. The lighthouse was still a kilometer away, across rocky terrain that offered little cover. And between them and their goal stood a group of collectors, their weapons ready. At the lighthouse, the enemy was waiting. The leader of the slavers, his scars shining like trophies, stepped forward. "Fat trash," he growled. "You are not worth the dust." Sierra clenched her fists, but did not speak. She and John rushed toward the lighthouse, gunfire tearing through the air. John kicked the door, his shoulder cracking, but the enemies were getting closer, a dozen boots clattering. Sierra knew what to do. "Turn it on," she shouted and rushed to the side, her scream dragging the enemies with her. The collector leader was Drav, his body a testament to his people's obsession with scarification. Each mark told a story of battle, of domination, his yellow eyes fixed on Sierra with pure hatred. "The smooth skin returns," he spat, "still alive despite your weakness." Sierra didn't respond to the taunt. She assessed the situation rapidly. 6 collectors, all armed, blocking the path to the lighthouse. No way around them in the open terrain. John stepped forward. "I am Lieutenant John Harker of the Federation Fleet. Stand down or face the consequences." Drav laughed, a sound like rocks grating together. "The Federation has no jurisdiction here, human, and you are in no position to make demands." "Maybe not," John admitted, "but I am in a position to do this." He threw something small and metallic high into the air. All eyes followed it instinctively, including the collectors. In that moment of distraction, Shara grabbed John's arm and they ran, not toward the lighthouse, but to the side, toward a rocky outcropping. Bullets tore up the ground around them. Shara felt the heat of a near miss against her cheek. They dove behind the rocks just as Drav's thrown knife embedded itself where John's head had been a moment before. "What now?" Shara gasped. John was looking past her at something in the distance. "Now we wait." "For what?" "For that." He pointed to the sky, where a small object was descending rapidly. The object that John had thrown wasn't a weapon or a distraction. It was a locator beacon, and responding to its signal was a Federation drone, sleek and deadly, dropping from high atmosphere. The drones streaked over the collectors, firing precision shots that scattered them. It wasn't enough to neutralize them, but it created chaos and confusion, exactly what John and Ciara needed. "Now!" John shouted, and they broke cover, racing toward the lighthouse. Drav saw them and roared in fury. He fired his weapon, the shots going wide in his rage. Then he signaled to his men, who regrouped and gave chase. The lighthouse door was reinforced metal, designed to withstand Var's harsh elements. John and Ciara reached it just as the drone was shot down by the collector's combined fire. "It's locked," Ciara pounded on the door. John produced a small tool from his boot and inserted it into the lock. "Federation override, standard issue for pilots." The lock clicked open, and they tumbled inside, slamming the door shut behind them. The interior of the lighthouse was dark and dusty, unused for years. A spiral staircase led up to the beacon room at the top. "Can you hold them off while I activate the transmitter?" John asked. Kara nodded, dragging a heavy metal cabinet in front of the door. It wouldn't stop the collectors for long, but it might buy them some time. John dashed up the stairs while Ciara searched the lighthouse's lower level for anything useful. She found an old toolbox and grabbed a heavy wrench just as the first impacts hit the door. "Ciara!" Drav's voice called from outside. "Surrender now, and I'll make your death quick. The humans, too." "Go to hell, Drav!" she shouted back. The pounding on the door intensified. The cabinet began to slide across the floor with each impact. Ciara braced herself against it, muscles straining. Upstairs, she could hear John working on the transmitter, his curses echoing down the stairwell. Come on," he muttered. "Power up, you ancient piece of—" The door splintered at the edges. A collector's arm reached through a gap, groping for the interior lock. Ciara swung the wrench, breaking the arm with a sickening crack. A scream followed, and the arm withdrew. "John," she called, "whatever you're doing, do it faster." "Almost there," he shouted back. "The power cells are degraded. I'm having to rewire the—" The door exploded inward, sending the cabinet and Ciara flying. She crashed into the far wall, the impact knocking the breath from her lungs. The wrench clattered away across the floor. Drav stepped through the smoke, his yellow eyes finding her immediately. "No more running, smooth skin." Two collectors flanked him, weapons raised. Ciara tried to stand, but her body refused to respond, stunned from the impact. "Where's the human?" Drav demanded. "Gone," Ciara lied. "He took a hidden passage. He's halfway to his ship by now." Drav's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Search the lighthouse," he ordered his men. "Find him." The collectors moved toward the staircase. Ciara's heart raced. If they reached John before he activated the transmitter, all would be lost. She ran, branches tearing her clothes, her enemies chasing after her. Ciara dove to where the blue-haired wasps were buzzing and kicked the nest. The swarm exploded, the stingers hitting her like bullets. She fell. The pain tore at her, but she held on. The leader grabbed her by the throat, his eyes blazing. "You are nothing," he hissed. Ciara wheezed. "I'm standing." She pushed him into the pit where the wasps buzzed and fell in after him, her hands shaking. But she did not give up. With a surge of desperate strength, Ciara lunged forward and tackled one of the collectors from behind. They crashed to the floor together, Ciara clawing and punching with ferocity born of desperation. The collector was stronger, but Ciara was fighting for her life, and for John's. "Run!" she screamed up the stairwell, hoping John would hear and find another way out. The second collector turned back to help his comrade. Ciara's brief advantage was lost as they both grabbed her, pinning her to the floor. Drav approached slowly, savoring the moment. From his belt, he drew a ceremonial knife, the same kind used for ritual scarification among their people. "I've changed my mind," he said, kneeling beside her. "I won't kill you quickly. First, I'll give you what you've always wanted. Scars." He pressed the knife to her cheek, drawing a thin line of dark blue blood. "Hundreds of them, until there's no smooth skin left." Ciara spat in his face. "Do your worst." Upstairs, a sudden humming filled the air. The transmitter was powering up. Drav's head snapped up. "No!" He turned to one of the collectors. "Kill her! I'll deal with the human." He raced up the stairs, taking them two at a time. The collector pressed his weapon to Ciara's head. She closed her eyes, waiting for the end. There was a shot, but no pain. Sierra opened her eyes to see the collector slumping forward. A hole burned through his chest. Behind him stood the second collector, his weapon smoking. But it wasn't a collector anymore. The figure's face rippled, features shifting from Varian to human. An infiltrator from the Federation, disguised with holographic technology. Lieutenant Harker isn't the only Federation operative on VAR, the infiltrator said, helping Sierra up. Now let's help your friend. They raced up the stairs together, the infiltrator leading the way. At the top, they found John grappling with Drav near the transmitter console. The beacon was active, sending its signal to the stars, but the fight had moved perilously close to the edge of the open-air platform. "Shoot him!" Sierra shouted to the infiltrator. "Can't get a clean shot," he replied, circling for a better angle. Drav was stronger than John, pushing the human inexorably toward the edge. John's feet scraped against the metal floor as he struggled to maintain his balance. Kiara grabbed a piece of broken equipment and swung it at Drav's head. He ducked, releasing John to face the new threat. "You just don't know when to die," Drav growled at Sierra. "Neither do you," she replied, and charged. Their bodies collided with bone-jarring force. Drav's knife slashed at her, opening a cut on her arm. Sierra ignored the pain, driving her knee into his stomach. They grappled at the edge of the platform, neither willing to yield. John and the infiltrator tried to help, but the narrow platform left no room for them to intervene without risking pushing both combatants over the edge. Drav locked his hands around Kiara's throat, squeezing. "You're nothing," he hissed into her face. "A defect, a mistake of nature." Sierra's vision began to darken. Her lungs screamed for air, but in that moment of extremity, something inside her hardened into unbreakable resolve. With her last strength, she drove her thumbs into Drav's eyes. He howled in pain, his grip loosening. Kiara twisted, reversing their positions so that Drav was the one with his back to the abyss. "I am not nothing," she gasped. "I am Sierra." And she pushed. Drav's face registered shock, then terror as he toppled backward. His hands clutched at air, finding no purchase. He fell, his scream fading as he plummeted to the canyon floor far below. Sierra collapsed, her body finally giving in to exhaustion and pain. John caught her before she hit the floor. "The transmitter," she whispered. "Sending," John confirmed. "Help is coming." A roar tore through the sky. The human fleet burst in, volleys tearing the enemy to pieces. John, turning on the beacon, rushed back, his voice hoarse. "Sierra!" He found her near the pit, motionless, stings covering her skin. "Don't you dare die!" he barked, carrying her to the ship. The paratroopers fought, enemies fell, but John held her tight. In the medical bay, Sierra opened her eyes. John was sitting next to her, his face tired but alive. "You did it," he said. "You are beautiful for not breaking." Sierra looked up at him, her voice soft. "Thank you, pilot." She nodded as firmly as a soldier. The Federation cruiser Horizon appeared in Var's atmosphere within hours of receiving the distress signal. Dropships deployed tactical teams that quickly overwhelmed the remaining collectors in the area. Sierra drifted in and out of consciousness as John carried her to the extraction point. She was vaguely aware of being loaded onto a medical shuttle, of the acceleration as they left Var's surface, of bright lights and concerned voices in the Horizon's medical bay. When she finally awoke fully, 3 days had passed. She was lying in a recovery pod, her wounds treated and healing. The room was unfamiliar, all gleaming metal and soft, pulsing lights. A human doctor noticed she was awake and approached. "How are you feeling?" he asked, checking readings on a monitor above her bed. "Like I was trampled by a herd of 6-horned trombacks," Sierra groaned. "Where am I?" "The Federation cruiser Horizon. You're safe now." "And the collectors?" "We've launched a full operation against their facilities on VAR. The main compound was neutralized yesterday." Kara tried to sit up, but pain shot through her body. "And the captives? My people?" "Being treated and relocated to Federation worlds if they wish. No one will be forced to return to a society that rejected them." The enormity of it hit Kiara like a physical force. The collectors were finished. The smooth skins were free. After a lifetime of running and hiding, it was over. "And John?" she asked. "The pilot?" "Lieutenant Harker is debriefing with Captain Reiko. He's been quite concerned about you." Checked on you every hour. As if summoned by his name, the door slid open and John walked in. He looked different in his Federation uniform, more official, but still with that same steady gaze that had seen past her smoothness to the person beneath. "You're awake," he said, relief evident in his voice. "The doctor wasn't sure when you'd come around." "It takes more than a few wasps and a madman to keep me down," Shira replied, trying to sound stronger than she felt. The doctor excused himself, leaving them alone. John pulled a chair to her bedside. "The Federation Council is very interested in what we uncovered on Var. The slave operation extended much further than anyone realized. And my people? The ones without scars? They're being offered asylum, new homes, new opportunities." John hesitated. "You too, of course." Shira looked away. "I don't know any other life than survival, John. What would I do in your Federation? Whatever you want. You could settle on a colony world, start fresh, or," he paused, "you could join the fleet." Kira laughed, then winced at the pain it caused. "Me? A Federation officer? Why not? You've proven your courage, your resourcefulness. We need people like you, especially with your knowledge of non-aligned worlds." The idea was so unexpected that Ciara didn't know how to respond. A place where her smooth skin wouldn't matter, where she might be valued for her abilities rather than marked as defective. "Think about it," John said, standing. "No rush to decide." As he turned to leave, Kiara called after him. "John." He looked back. "Thank you for seeing me." He smiled, his eyes warm. "I saw you from the first moment, Sierra, and everything I've learned since then has only confirmed what I knew then." "And what was that?" "That you are beautiful, not despite your smooth skin, but because of who you are." After John left, Sierra stood carefully and moved to the viewport. Outside, stars streamed by as the horizon traveled at faster-than-light speeds, carrying her away from Var, away from a lifetime of shame and hiding. For the first time, she looked at her reflection and didn't immediately turn away in disgust. Her blue skin was marked now, with cuts and bruises from the battle, yes, but also with experience, with survival, with choice. Not beautiful, perhaps, not yet, but no longer nothing. 6 months later, the Federation diplomatic vessel Concordia entered orbit around Var. On the bridge, Officer Cadet Ciara stood in her new uniform, watching her homeworld grow larger in the view screen. "Nervous?" John asked, coming to stand beside her. His lieutenant's bars gleamed on his collar. "Terrified," Ciara admitted. "I never thought I'd return here." "You don't have to be part of the landing party. The diplomatic team would understand." Ciara shook her head. "No. I need to do this." The mission was unprecedented, the first formal diplomatic contact between the Federation and Var. The discovery of the collector slave operation had forced the reclusive Varian government to engage with the wider galactic community. And who better to serve as cultural liaison than Ciara, a Varian who now understood both worlds? The shuttle ride to the surface was tense. Ciara sat rigidly in her seat, memories flooding back with each kilometer of descent. The forests where she had hidden, the swamps she had navigated, the canyons where she had fought for her life, and the capital city, which she had never dared approach until today. Varian City was a sprawling metropolis of stone and metal, its architecture emphasizing sharp angles and exposed structural elements. A physical manifestation of the Varian cultural emphasis on showing one's scars. The shuttle landed in a designated diplomatic zone. Captain Reiko led the way, followed by the Federation diplomats, with John and Ciara bringing up the rear. "Remember," Captain Reiko murmured to Ciara, "you represent the Federation now. Their cultural attitudes toward you are their problem, not yours." Kira nodded, straightening her spine. She wasn't here as a defective smooth skin. She was here as Federation Officer Cadet Ciara, and she would comport herself accordingly. The Varian delegation was waiting, high-ranking officials whose bodies were so covered in ritual scars that little blue skin remained visible. Their yellow eyes widened at the sight of Kiara in a Federation uniform. "What is the meaning of this?" demanded the lead Varian, Minister Krav. "You bring a defective to an official diplomatic meeting?" Captain Reiko's expression remained professional, but her voice cooled noticeably. "Officer Cadet Ciara is a valued member of this delegation, chosen specifically for her unique insights into both our cultures. Minister Crab's face twisted with disgust. Impossible. A smooth skin has no value, no status. In the Federation, John said coldly, we value individuals based on their actions and abilities, not arbitrary physical characteristics. The standoff might have escalated further, but another Varian stepped forward from the delegation. Older, his scars faded with age. Sierra, he said, his voice uncertain. Daughter of Moran? Kiara froze. She knew that voice, though she hadn't heard it in over 15 years. Father, she acknowledged stiffly. The Federation delegates exchanged surprised glances. This unexpected connection had not been part of the mission briefing. Moran approached slowly, his yellow eyes scanning Kiara as if seeing her for the first time. You live, and you wear the uniform of off-worlders. I found a place where my skin doesn't define my worth, Kiara replied evenly. A complicated emotion crossed Moran's face, something like shame, quickly suppressed. You were right to leave, he said quietly. After we sold you, your mother never recovered. She faded, died within a year. Kiara had imagined this moment many times, confronting the parents who had sold her like unwanted property. In her imagination, she had raged or coldly dismissed them or simply walked away. She had never imagined feeling pity. I'm sorry, she said, surprising herself, not for leaving, but for her pain. Minister Crab interrupted impatiently. This family reunion is irrelevant. We are here to discuss the Federation's illegal intervention on Vaer and their absurd allegations about slave trading. Not allegations, Captain Reiko corrected. Documented facts. The Federation has liberated over 3,000 captives from collector facilities on Vaer. Isolated criminals, Crab dismissed, not sanctioned by the government. Operating openly for decades, Sierra countered, with the full knowledge of officials who profited from looking the other way. The negotiations that followed were tense and difficult. The Varian officials stonewalled, denied, deflected. But the Federation team had come prepared with overwhelming evidence, including testimony from the liberated captives and collector financial records showing payments to government officials. Throughout it all, Sierra stood tall, her smooth blue face a silent rebuke to everything her culture had taught about worth and beauty. She spoke when needed, translated cultural nuances, and never once flinched under the contemptuous stares of the Varian officials. During a recess, Moran approached her again. Your Federation, they truly value you? They value what I can do, what I know, Sierra said, not how I look. Moran nodded slowly. Perhaps we have been wrong about many things. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a full acknowledgement. But from a culture as rigid as Vaer's, it was revolutionary. The negotiations eventually produced an agreement. Vaer would end all involvement in slave trading, allow Federation monitoring of compliance, and begin a process of cultural exchange. In return, the Federation would provide technological assistance and open trade relations. As the diplomatic team prepared to depart, Kara found John waiting by the shuttle. Ready to go home? He asked. Kara looked back at the Varian city, at the world that had rejected her. Then she looked at John, at his uniform matching her own, at his eyes that had seen her value from the first moment. I already am home, she said, and boarded the shuttle without looking back. In the years that followed, Kara rose through the ranks of the Federation fleet, her unique background making her invaluable for diplomatic missions to non-aligned worlds. The agreement with Vaer held, and slowly, painfully, Varian society began to evolve. Not quickly enough for many. Smooth-skinned Varians continued to seek asylum in Federation space, finding communities where they could live without shame. Sierra helped many of them adjust, standing as living proof that there was life beyond Vaer's narrow definitions of worth. And John remained by her side, first as a mentor, then as a partner, then as something more. Their relationship crossed species boundaries and cultural divides, but at its core was the simple truth that had started everything: the ability to see beauty where others saw only defects. On Sierra's 5th anniversary in the fleet, a package arrived from Vaer. Inside was a traditional Vaerian ceremonial knife, the kind used for ritual scarification, with a note in her father's handwriting. Some traditions deserve to end. Some scars are best carried inside, where they make us stronger without being seen. Sierra placed the knife in a display case in her quarters, not as a reminder of what she had escaped, but as a marker of how far both she and her people had come. She would never be considered beautiful by traditional Varian standards. Her skin, though now marked with the natural scars of a life fully lived, would never bear the ritualized patterns her culture had once demanded. But when she caught John looking at her with that same expression he'd worn in the forest years ago, wonder, admiration, recognition of something essential and valuable, she knew a deeper truth. Beauty isn't carved into skin. It emerges from within, in acts of courage, in moments of choice, in the decision to stand tall when everything around you insists you should crawl. And in that way, Shira was the most beautiful Varian who had ever lived. Kira ran through the thicket, her heart pounding like a drum. Her blue skin shone with sweat, but she was scarless, a disgrace to her people. For them, scars meant strength, respect, and smoothness, like hers meant weakness. Fat trash, they called her. She was running from slave traders who hunted people like her for the markets of distant stars. Her breath was ragged, but she couldn't stop. Suddenly, an explosion tore through the sky. The human shuttle slammed to the ground, metal creaked, and smoke rose in a column. Ciara froze. Should she run? But her legs were already carrying her to the wreckage. Among the twisted steel lay a man, John, the pilot, gray hair on his temples, blood on his face. He was wheezing, but holding on. Behind Ciara, a roar sounded, a blue-haired panther, claws ready to tear. Ciara grabbed a rock and threw it at the beast, which recoiled, but the growl was getting closer. She grabbed John by the shoulders, pulling with all her might, her muscles burning. The panther jumped, and Ciara shoved a piece of metal in its direction, forcing it to back away. They fell behind a fallen tree, where Ciara held her breath as the beast's claws scraped the bark. She clenched her fists, thinking, "Not again!" The panther circled, sniffing the air. Its hunger was greater than its caution. It leaped over the fallen tree, directly toward the unconscious human. Ciara didn't think. She threw herself between the beast and John, thrusting a jagged piece of metal forward. The panther impaled itself on the makeshift spear, its momentum driving the metal deep into its chest. Hot, sticky blood spilled over Ciara's hands as the creature thrashed, then went still. Ciara pushed the dead weight off her, gasping for breath. The smell of blood hung heavy in the air. She dragged John deeper into the forest, away from the crash site. Slave traders would investigate soon, drawn by the shuttle's fiery descent. Night fell as Ciara made camp in a small cave, hidden by dense foliage. John still hadn't woken. She gathered medicinal leaves, crushing them into a paste to apply to his wounds. As she worked, she kept her eyes averted from her reflection in a small puddle. Her smooth, unmarked skin was a source of shame, a constant reminder of her status as an outcast. John woke as Ciara wrapped leaves that smelled like resin around his arm. She looked away, ashamed of her smooth skin. John coughed, his voice rough but lively. "You saved my hide, girl. Thank you. You're beautiful, you know." Ciara froze, as if someone had stabbed her in the chest. Her eyes flashed. "Beautiful?" The word cut like a knife. "Smooth as a disgrace, a mockery." "Don't be ridiculous," she grumbled, but John repeated himself firmly. "I know what I'm saying." Her throat tightened. No one had ever looked at her like that, without mockery. "Your name?" John asked, his breathing still labored. "Ciara," she replied curtly. "John Harker, Federation pilot." He tried to sit up but winced in pain. "My shuttle, destroyed, and we should move. That crash will bring trouble." John studied her blue skin, so different from his own. "You're not afraid of me. You've seen humans before?" "Only slaves," Ciara said, gathering her meager supplies. "The collectors take all kinds for the markets." "Collectors? Slave traders. They're hunting me." She helped John to his feet. "Can you walk?" John tested his weight, grimacing. "I've survived worse landings." He looked back toward the crash site. "I need to retrieve something from the shuttle." "Too dangerous," Ciara said sharply. "The collectors will be swarming it by now." "It's a transmitter. My only chance to signal the Federation fleet. His gray eyes met hers. Help me get it, and I promise you safe passage off this planet. Shara laughed bitterly. Off-worlders and their promises. This one I'll keep, John said, his tone leaving no room for doubt. The hum of engines broke the silence. Searchlights flashed in the darkness. Boots clattered. The slavers had tracked the shuttle. Ciara tugged on John's sleeve. Move, pilot, or we're going to get killed. They rushed forward and John stumbled, but held on. Ciara could hear the enemy screaming behind her, her heart pounding. She knew every turn, but the enemies were faster than she thought. They ran through the dark forest, guided only by the pale blue moonlight filtering through the dense canopy. John was surprisingly agile for an injured man, keeping pace with Ciara despite his wounds. Behind them, the collector's shouts grew louder. This way, Ciara hissed, pulling John into a narrow ravine. They pressed themselves against the damp rock wall as a patrol passed overhead, their searchlights sweeping the forest floor. How do they track so effectively in the dark? John whispered. Ocular implants, Ciara explained. They can see heat signatures. Great. John checked his pockets, pulling out a small device. A scrambler. Might buy us some time. He activated it, and a soft pulse emanated from the device. It'll confuse their sensors, but not for long. They reached the swamp, where water squelched underfoot and blue-haired snakes swayed, ready to strike. Ciara knew that the patrols would be on foot here. John plucked a piece of metal from his torn flight suit and held it like a spear. Show me how not to get stuck, he said. Ciara nodded, her voice sharp. Follow me and don't be stupid. She led him along the roots, her eyes watching for snakes. The swamp was a nightmare landscape of twisted trees and bioluminescent fungi. Each step had to be carefully placed on the network of roots that provided the only solid footing. Beneath them, the murky water concealed venomous creatures waiting to strike. The snakes are drawn to movement, Ciara warned, stepping gracefully from root to root. Step where I step and keep your balance. John followed her path, though less elegantly. His boots slipped on the slick roots, nearly sending him into the water several times. Ciara's hand shot out, steadying him. Thanks, he muttered. Just keep moving. Suddenly, 3 enemies jumped out of the shadows, their sticks buzzing. Ciara threw a stone into the water, and the snakes rushed, grabbing one. His scream drowned in the mud. John pushed the second one with his spear, but it deflected, and the metal fell. The third was aiming for Ciara. She dove for a root, but the enemy jumped after her, his hand clutching her shoulder. She hit him with her elbow, pushing him into the mud. The mud dragged her after him, her fingers slipping. John grabbed her arm, his face twisted in pain. Hold on, goddammit, he barked, pulling her up. They crawled back into the shadows, wheezing. Ciara looked at him. Why didn't you leave me? John snorted. You got me out. My turn. Her lips twitched. Not a smile, but close. The slave trader who fell into the mud thrashed wildly as blue-haired snakes converged on him. His screams echoed through the swamp, then abruptly ceased. Ciara didn't look back. She'd seen such deaths before. The collectors want me alive, she said as they pushed deeper into the swamp. I'm worth more that way. Why are they hunting you specifically? John asked, breathing heavily from exertion. Ciara hesitated. I escaped their compound 5 seasons ago. The only one ever to do so. Impressive. Necessary. She pointed ahead to where the swamp ended and a vast grassland began. We need to cross that before dawn. The grassland offered no cover, just shoulder-high blue grass stretching for kilometers. They would be exposed, vulnerable. No choice, John said, reading her expression. Let's go. They moved through the grass in a crouch, the stalks whipping at their faces. The twin moons of Var hung low in the sky, casting enough light to navigate, but also making them visible to pursuers. In the distance, the howl of hunting hounds echoed. Blue-hair hounds, Ciara whispered. They can track a scent for days. How far to the lighthouse? John asked. Half a night's journey if we're lucky. The howls grew closer. The hounds had caught their scent. Ciara and John broke into a run, abandoning stealth for speed. The grass parted like water before them, then closed again, erasing their path. But the hounds were gaining. Their eerie blue forms appeared at the edge of the grassland, massive creatures with 6 legs and elongated jaws, filled with needle-like teeth. We can't outrun them, John said between breaths. Sierra reached into her pouch and pulled out a handful of red berries. Bloodfruit. It masks scent. She crushed the berries in her palm and smeared the juice on John's clothes, then her own. It won't fool them for long, but it might confuse them. They veered sharply to the right, cutting across their own trail. The hounds hesitated at the intersection of scents, their handlers shouting commands.